All right, so you're here with us on the deep dive. You know the drill, you want to get right to the heart of things, cut through all the extra stuff, right? So today, we're going deep on SAP Integrated Business Planning IBP for short. We're not going to mess around with all the super detailed manuals or
We
anything.
like skip all the fluff.
Exactly. We're going straight for those core concepts. And to help us do that, we're going to use some actual practice questions from the CIBP 2502 certification exam. It's like a fast track to understanding some really crucial stuff about SAP IBP.
Yeah, and we've condensed the main exam information and grabbed some sample questions so we can kind of bypass all that initial legwork.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
For those of you out there thinking about taking the certification, just as a reminder, it's a 3-hour exam, 80 questions, multiple choice and multiple response, 73% pass rate, all in English.
English only.
But our real focus today isn't just about passing the exam. It's about really understanding those bedrock principles that make SAP IBP actually function in the real world.
Okay, so let's get into this. And the best way to start is by looking at the absolute foundation, right? How do you actually build the structure for planning in SAP IBP? Our first practice question jumps right into it. Which application is used to manage planning areas and key figures in SAP IBP?
Right, good question.
So the options are Data Integration Application, Configuration UI, Planning View, and SAP Fiori Launchpad. So what's the key player here? What's the essential piece?
Okay, so the answer and, a super fundamental concept to grasp here is the configuration UI. And what's so interesting about the configuration UI is that it's truly the central command center for setting up your whole planning environment in IBP. It's not just about those planning areas and key figures, which are, kind of the basic building blocks, but think about your master data, your products, your customers, your locations. These are the nouns of your business.
My nouns, yeah.
And the configuration UI is where you define these nouns, along with all their crucial attributes. If this initial setup isn't super precise, well, it's kind of like trying to have a conversation with a really limited vocabulary. Your entire planning process becomes less effective.
Right. You're just not equipped.
Yeah, you're limited.
Yeah.
And critically, this is also where you establish your time profiles, which dictate how you're going to view your data over time.
Yep.
We'll dive deeper into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But yeah, the configuration UI is I like to think of it as the architect's studio, where you lay out the whole blueprint for your planning capabilities.
Okay, so the configuration UI, that's where you design the whole house, so to speak.
Yes.
But then what happens when you actually want to move in and start using it?
Right. That leads us to our second question.
Right.
What happens when you activate a planning area in SAP IBP?
So the choices are planning operators being scheduled, master data being regenerated, the Excel add-in initializing, or, and this is the right answer, key figures being created in the back-end HANA database. Why is this activation step such a crucial, pivotal moment?
Okay, well, if we think about this in the bigger picture,
Yeah.
activating a planning area is really that transformation point. Your carefully crafted design, it suddenly becomes a tangible reality. Imagine, flipping the switch after wiring a new building, all of a sudden everything comes to life. So the system takes all those definitions you've made in the configuration UI, your planning areas, key figures, which are essentially your business metrics, right? Your master data structures, your time profiles, and it physically creates them within the underlying ATA database. And why is this ATA database so important? Think of it as a super efficient digital filing cabinet, but it's engineered for speed. This in-memory processing is what allows IBP to handle massive amounts of data and perform all those calculations super quickly, which is essential for agile and responsive planning. So activation really makes the planning area available for data entry and for execution of planning operators, as the explanation says. And without this crucial step, your design remains just a blueprint on paper. It's really the key to making your planning model operational.
Right, so now you've got your planning area up and running, the lights are on, things are ready to go.
Exactly.
But now we need to think about, how do planners actually work with the, potentially huge amounts of data that are in IBP?
Right.
And this brings us to our third question, and this one focuses on the Excel UI. What is the purpose of using a planning filter in SAP IBP Excel UI? So our choices here are controlling visibility in the web UI, limiting time periods for operators, managing user authorizations, and then the correct one, displaying specific combinations of master data in the planning view. So how does this filtering actually help someone who's in the trenches doing the day-to-day planning? How does this help them?
Yeah, this is a really important point about managing complexity. When you're dealing with potentially thousands of products, hundreds of locations, all sorts of different customers, the Excel add-in, while it's super powerful for analysis and manipulation, it can become, overwhelming pretty fast. Planning filters act like I think of it like a targeted lens.
Okay, yeah.
They allow you, the planner, to narrow your focus, to like just zero in on the specific slices of data that are relevant to what you're working on right now. Like, for example, if you're in charge of forecasting sales for a particular product line in a certain region, let's say for the next quarter, a planning filter lets you define those precise criteria, those selected combinations of master data, like, products, locations, customers, and it helps you avoid getting lost in a sea of information that's not relevant.
Right.
Think of it like searching for a specific email with multiple filters applied.
Oh, okay.
It just cuts down the noise.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. It's like the email filter, but for your planning data.
Exactly. And this, directly tackles that problem of information overload. It makes things so much easier to use. And it even helps performance because the system doesn't have to display as much data.
Right, it can work faster.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the element of time a little bit, and our next question really dives into that.
Yeah.
It deals with the concept of the time profile. In SAP IBP, what is the function of the time profile in a planning area? The choices are controlling user access, limiting activation frequency, storing real-time alerts, and then the correct answer, defining the time granularity and time buckets used in planning. Now, this might sound pretty simple, but why is this seemingly basic concept so fundamental to effective planning?
So, what's really cool here is how the time profile basically dictates the rhythm of your planning. Think about it. Different parts of a business operate on different time horizons.
For sure.
Like short-term operational planning might need a daily or weekly view, almost like looking at the, minute-by-minute movements of the stock market.
Yeah.
But then strategic forecasting might only need a monthly or quarterly perspective, more like looking at the long-term trends. The time profile is where you define these levels of time granularity, days, weeks, months, and the time buckets. And this really dictates how your data is stored, how it's aggregated for analysis, and ultimately how it's displayed in your planning views. It forms the basis for the time structure of the planning area, as the explanation says. Without a well-defined and appropriate time profile, your planning data just wouldn't have a consistent or meaningful time dimension.
Yeah, it would be all over the place.
Yeah, imagine trying to navigate with a map where the scale keeps changing.
Oh, right.
It'd be, impossible to figure out where you are.
Yeah.
Similarly, a poorly defined time profile, it can lead to really unreliable analysis and ultimately bad decision-making.
Okay, so we've established the structural blueprint with the configuration UI, we've brought it to life with activation, learned how to focus our data views with filters, and we've seen how important time is. Now let's think about how businesses actually track their planning efforts over time and compare different scenarios. Our final practice question looks at this with the idea of versioning. So the question is, what is a benefit of using versioning in SAP IBP? The options are storing historical data, improving operator performance, enabling simultaneous user access, and automated integration with external tools. And the correct answer, of course, is storing historical data from previous S&OP cycles. So why is it so valuable, especially in a business environment that's always changing, to have this historical record?
Yeah, well, if we think about this in terms of business intelligence and continuous improvement, versioning offers a really powerful capability. By allowing planners to store and compare different planning scenarios or like historical cycles, such as previous sales and operations planning S&OP runs.
Yeah.
You get all these amazing insights into trends, the accuracy of past forecasts, and the impact of different strategic assumptions. It's like having multiple drafts of a super important document.
Oh, okay.
You can go back and see how your thinking evolved, what changes were made and why. This is super useful for scenario analysis, asking those what-if questions. What if we boost our marketing spend by 10%? What if a key supplier has a disruption? You can create separate versions to model these different possibilities side by side. It's also crucial for auditing, being able to look back at past plans and understand the rationale behind decisions. And fundamentally, it helps in understanding changes over time. Are forecasts becoming more accurate? How are market dynamics impacting our plans? Versioning provides that essential historical context. It really turns your planning data into a valuable learning tool that informs future strategies. It's not just about looking backward. It's about learning from the past to create a more resilient and effective future.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.